Originally in this country, hockey equipment was based on trial and error for known injuries. Those of you who are young enough to remember, Eaton's catalog inside your hockey socks to protect your shins were the start of shin pads. But presently, we have a pretty good understanding of the mechanism of injury and of the tissues that have to respond to an applied stress. And lots of people work at making equipment and making it safe, but how do we know that it actually works? Well, this is where standards come into play, and we use these to provide the performance requirements of a piece of protective equipment, to know that they provide a reasonable level of injury risk reduction. And in developing standards, we try to answer questions such as the following: what body part has to be protected? What level of protection are we looking for? Can't reduce all the risks, but what level of risk can we attempt to achieve? What are the known hazards in a given activity? And what are the foreseeable hazards, if any? Well, it's one thing to have a group of people sit down and write standards. It's quite another thing to see that the standard actually makes equipment or helps to guide the manufacture of equipment that works the way it's supposed to. The standard details the performance requirements. It is the certification that's responsible for testing that these performance requirements are actually met. And there's two ways in which that is done. There's third-party certification by an accredited certification agency such as the Canadian Standards Association or the Bureau de Normalisation de Québec, or there's self-certification by the manufacturers. And self-certification isn't always the best way to go because, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, there are some unscrupulous people manufacturing equipment that they claim meets Canadian standards requirements or meets the American standards requirements, and they don't meet them at all. So you have to look for certain things. And in Canada, we have 3 pieces of hockey equipment that are certified. For helmets, you have to look for the CSA mark, and the same for face shields. For throat protectors, you have to look for the B&Q mark. Now, there's no standards for skates, there's no standards for gloves yet, shin pads, there's also no standards for mouth guards. And with all due respect to my friend Paul Piccinini, I do have to mention a couple of things about mouth guards here before I continue. The first is that mouth guards are very good at protecting dentition. There is absolutely no evidence that they reduce the risk of concussion. There is no doubt that stabilization of the neck is an important factor in reducing rotation of the head, which helps to reduce rotation of the neck. Stabilization of the neck helps reduce rotation of the head, helps reduce rotation of the brain. But simply biting down on a mouth guard does not activate the muscles in your neck to do so. It activates the muscles in your jaw, the ones that you use to chew. In order to activate the muscles in your neck, you must activate them actively by pulling the neck. And this implies that you have to see the attacker, in quotes, coming at you in order to protect yourself, to bull your neck, strengthen your neck muscles, and avoid head rotation. If you've got a mouth guard in your mouth at the same time, you're guaranteed, almost, that you'll protect your teeth. I mentioned that we don't have standards for some pieces of equipment, but we do have other CSA standards for other types of equipment and things. We have a face protector standard for ringette. We have a set of guidelines for spectator safety in indoor arenas, and this is something that Hockey Canada asked us to put together several years ago when people were getting hit with flying pucks. And we do have a recreational ski and snowboard helmet standard. It's not used very often yet because manufacturers are still trying to figure out how to meet the requirements of that. In addition to the issue of protective equipment in Canada, we work effectively with the international fraternity to develop international standards. We have an international standard for hockey helmets and face shields. We're working on one for throat protectors and shin guards. Once those are done, we'll begin to tackle some other pieces of equipment. Well, what has standardization of equipment done? First of all, over the years, there's been a marked improvement in performance of head, face, and throat protection. The injury risk from focal head injuries, that is, skull fractures, subdural and epidural hematomas, pardon me, blind eyes, and throat lacerations has been dramatically reduced. But in spite of all of our standards, we still have issues with respect to concussions. And you notice there's a question there, concussion helmets. Is there any such thing as a concussion helmet? And the answer is no. Helmets are very effective, as I mentioned previously, and Jamie mentioned this morning, against localized head injuries. We don't see very many skull fractures and hematomas. They have very limited use against brain injury, of which a concussion is one type. The reason for this are quite complex. I can spend another hour here explaining to you why rotational injury is so complex and why it's so difficult to combat this problem with a helmet. But suffice it to say, regardless of what you hear, who you hear it from, whether it's a former National Hockey League player or not, there is no such thing as a concussion helmet. They just do not exist. And my opinion is that reducing concussion risk requires a great deal of behavioral adjustment on the part of many. Pardon me. I take these pills for my heart and they make my throat dry sometimes. Lois asked me if I would talk about checking in hockey. Reducing the risk of injury in hockey is not done by equipment alone. The use of proper equipment with good technique is a must. Thanks, Howard. And good checking technique involves both giving and receiving a check. I know something about this because I coached hockey for over 30 years. That's not in my bio, but just so you know. Giving a check it's important to remember that the purpose of such is to gain control of the puck. It's not to put the guy through the boards. It's to gain the puck. Which guy in this picture is doing the checking? Is it the guy in front or the guy behind? Well, it's supposed to be the guy in front. In order to check your opponent, you first have to outskate your opponent. You can't check them from the back, and you can't check them from the side. You have to outskate them, and you have to get in front of them. You have to be under control. This guy's not under very good control in the Canadiens uniform. He's fallen to the ice. He isn't staying on his feet. And he doesn't have a head-up posture because he's looking for the puck. But that's what has to be done. Get under the stick, gain the puck, and skate away. And it goes without saying that no checking from behind. In terms of receiving a check, the first comment I have is learn to play on a turn. For all you players in here and for you parents and coaches, teach your players how to play on a turn. People often ask me why Wayne Gretzky never got hurt playing hockey. I'll tell you why, because you could never catch him. He didn't play in a straight line. He always played on a turn, and he always knew where his opponents were on the ice. When somebody is going to check you, keep skating. Do not stop. You stop, you're going to get injured. If you keep skating, you eliminate a lot of that risk. Again, you have to be under control. You can see in this picture that Peter Angelo is not under control in trying to pace this Swedish player against the boards in a junior hockey game. For the player who's being checked, it's important for them to get close to the boards. The boards are the player's friend, believe it or not. If you get close to them and, give them a little TLC. You want to get close so that you're not propelled into the boards. That's when you get hurt. Attempt to avoid facing the glass at all cost. That way you don't put yourself in a position where somebody can hit you from behind. If you get close to the boards, you can use the long bones in your body, as this player is using the long bones in his legs, to absorb the blow. Play with your head up and stay on your feet. Those are important cues in checking, in receiving a check, that help players along with their good equipment. In summary, how do you reduce injury risk? Use certified CSA and B&Q equipment. Make sure that the equipment fits and is suited to the skill level and size of the player. Maintain your equipment in good repair and make sure it's not modified, because if it's modified, it loses its certification. Learn and use good checking skill and checking technique. And for those of you who buy on the internet, and several do, you must be aware and beware of counterfeit labels. Thank you.